No, I don't think that cat people or people that like cats are meh. But if you're someone that likes the movie Cats, that's debatable. Curious cat. Oh Jesus, turn that off. Hey everyone, it's David Fisch for Fisch to Go, where I do movie and TV show reviews, make lists and do essays, all of that fun stuff for you to take on the go. And guess what? It's October, which means it's the appropriate month to relish in the scares and frights and thrills of horror movies. I suppose you could do that anytime, really. And since I'm trying my best to watch movies I've never seen before, and now that I have a plethora of streaming services available at my disposal, I thought I would start off my October with a movie that I've never seen before and I've always heard about called Cat People. Not that I have any discernible interest in cats, unless you're talking about Meow the Jewels, which is Run the Jewels 2 in cat form. In fact, I'm kind of a dog person, even though I don't have one. Thumbs up for dogs? But considering the Criterion Channel is now hosting a slew of classic horror movies, the 1942 version of Cat People being one of them, and seeing how this is actually in the Library of Congress and being preserved for being aesthetically and culturally significant, I feel like this movie has to be on my list of must-sees, right? In addition to that, I thought I would also check out the 1982 remake by Paul Schrader, which is available for rental on Amazon Prime. And if you couldn't tell by the title of this video what I thought of both of them, well, let me explain in my review, so stick around. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ding that bell so that way you can help support the channel and be notified as soon as new content drops. Thanks guys, now let me tell you how I'm feline about these films, and let's jump in. So a screenwriter in the 1940s thought it was a good idea to come up with a story about cat people? And so here we are. That's all folks, the review's over. See you later. Specifically though, screenwriter DeWitt Bodine crafted a story in which a woman named Irina has a mysterious past and a connection with a Black Panther. No, not that Black Panther, but that actually might have been a more interesting twist. She meets a guy named Oliver who strikes up a conversation, and already they're on date number 2 when he buys her a cat which freaks out after seeing her. Which seriously, dude, a pet on date number 2? That's really quick and kind of creepy, and not the intentional creepy. But on the date he sees a statue of King John of Serbia impaling a cat, and Irina explains this legend that cats are evil. And yet having this random statue in her living room has no effect on Oliver because he continues being infatuated with her and notices things are mysteriously happening whenever she's around. A new woman appears in the picture that disrupts a potential marriage with Irina, and she becomes increasingly erratic and seeks help from a doctor who believes her story and falls in love with her. But her weird devotion to her first boo is something she unleashes on the doctor as he tries to kiss her, and she fully transforms into a panther. Oh, so she was a panther the whole time. Yeah, well the film makes it painfully obvious when animals start freaking out around her, human tracks follow panther tracks when police discover it, and the sound of a panther appears before Irina shows up each time. Alright, so the story is easy to jab at, but that's not actually why I don't like the movie. I can actually forgive the film's attempt at the kind of ludicrous fantasy horror story, seeing as how this was produced by Val Lewton, who mostly made low-budget horror films for RKO Pictures at the time. And I can understand the necessity for these B-movie escapist films of the time. I mean, 1942, so right in the heart of World War II, these must have been a nice escape from the real horrors that were going on in the Pacific and in Europe. But to me, the whole affair was just... Now I can see significance in the picture and the way it's lit and directed that has had influence in lighting and direction in horror films since, but that highlight alone doesn't help its sluggish pace and its insinuated scariness, which is the result of a mixture of hit and miss acting, really bland dialogue, and questionable narrative choices. Lead actress Simone Simon has a pretty stodgy performance in which it feels like she's trying to break through her real French accent for comprehension's sake, and it shows in a lot of sequences where she needs to emote more than she needs to just deliver a line of dialogue, which honestly isn't all that great either, with characters saying exactly how they feel and lending exposition to fill the gaps in the story. All of that wrapped in the odd choice to leave the viewer to imagine the horror of a woman turning into a panther. It's all insinuated, which would be fine if there were any noticeable form of tension, say like in Jaws for example, where you never see the shark until later on. There isn't really anything like that here, with the exception of a scene in which Alice, the girl Irina suspects is stealing the guy away from her, goes swimming in a community pool with the lights shut off and the light of the water reflecting along the wall as Alice concerns herself with the sounds of a panther approaching. It's the most memorable scene in the film for just giving me any sense of thrill, and it's easy to see how it influenced a lot of horror films. I'm looking at you, swim fan. There are a lot of exchanges between two characters, which again, the dialogue isn't great, so we just feel stuck in a movie that's maybe as long as the longest episode of Ozark, and nowhere near as thrilling. It just leaves me as a no-stakes horror film with a creep factor of 0. So while I think this might have conjured up thrills in the 40s, you know what, maybe not even. I think back to the Universal horror classics like The Wolfman or Dracula or The Mummy, which still offer plenty of thrills, and I think it's because of the showiness of the grotesque and the monstrosities. And while someone turning into a lethal variety of cat isn't inherently scary, I think more striking visuals and a progression of discovery in the story and in the characters could have propelled this even further beyond just moody lighting and direction. Perhaps I just wasn't in the mood. So in comparison to the 1982 version, which is technically better on a number of fronts with high-profile actors, a hot director and cinematographer team, and basically softcore sex and horrifying gore with practical effects to really ride up those striking visuals I just talked about, it's also... This 1982 remake takes most of the same plot elements of the original, but amps up the mythology and bases it in reality, in which the main character, Irina, is literally a descendant of panthers, but here she has to fully embrace and discover that for herself. The setting this time changes from the tight and bustling New York City to the loose and hauntingly quiet New Orleans, where she meets up with her brother, and through her brother does she startle herself with the knowledge that they are panthers born of an incestuous relationship that is just a thing among panthers according to this legend. And so the only way to escape the devilish transformation is to battle her sexual urges for others. Okay. So of course she meets cute with a guy named Oliver, who this time is a zoological expert, and she's madly confused about what to do with her urges, and there's another girl involved named Alice, but she's mostly left alone here. And it becomes a fight for Irina to decide who or what she really is. Now I can admire this approach a bit more, as it seems like Paul Schrader and screenwriter Alan Ormsby seem to be digging into the mythos a lot more that was just hinted at in the original, and it's less a focus on obsession and more a chance at self-exploration. The acting here is just a step up above the original, which I think is elevated thanks to Paul Schrader's staging of sequences and cinematographer John Bailey really evoking the mysticism of New Orleans with orange and green hues. Even if at times it feels like they just chose New Orleans as the new setting because tax incentives. And if you don't already know, David Bowie wrote the song Cat People Putting Out Fire for this film. It's one of my favorites from him. So that, along with Giorgio Moroder's score, really brings the creepy sexual vibes. But all of that said, Cat People's attempt at seriousness comes off as more distracting and a lot less fun. Maybe the idea of transforming into a cat will always have its side of camp, so I expect there to be a dose of fun, but for a film that's trying to delve us into the mythos and bring it into reality, it doesn't really have a care in the world for the themes that it's trying to provoke. The filmmakers have expanded the story and given Irina a sense of sexual agency that no doubt there is something more complex, more multi-layered in its establishment of womanhood and femininity, and that part of self-discovery, aside from her discovering she's a panther descendant, that is disappointingly buried here beneath chic 80s sex and horror tropes. It's often trying to find this awkward balance of pleasing audiences of the era with special effects thrills and blood and nudity, which I'll admit, a ludicrous plot like this would probably benefit from that, and maybe this would have been the fun, great B-movie that the original intended to be. But all while presenting these characters in a real world where logic persists and there are far superior themes that are bubbling underneath. So Cat People just comes off as underdeveloped and another missed opportunity to tell this woman's story it so rightly deserves. Sometimes I think to myself, am I overthinking this? And I probably am. But really, both films, for mostly different reasons, don't do justice for me, and so they sort of fall into this meh category where the films are just competently made and they could have done so much more with the technical aspects or with the material. And seeing how there was a 40-year break between the original and the remake, and it's been almost 40 years since the remake, and now, will we see another Cat People in 2022? I don't know of any in development, but having seen both of these now, I would love to see a version of Cat People that can maybe weave in the moodiness of the original and the themes of the remake and just get the scares right. I know, easier said than done, but that's my opinion on these horror films, or franchises, I guess. And now I kick it off to you. If you guys have seen these films, I would love to know what you thought about them, and of course I always need your movie and TV show recommendations, so be sure to leave all of that in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate a huge thumbs up, a subscribe, and ding that bell so that way you can help support the channel and be notified as soon as new content drops. Thanks again, and until next time, I'm David Fisch for Fisch to Go.